Hi, I'm John O'Leary. Welcome to Dead Air Live. With me is Herb Pierce, who is an author. He is a workshop trainer, organizational trainer, and a therapist. And Herb, you work with individuals, teams, couples, families. What have I left out?
Well, I love my work. For instance, I teach personality systems, and even if I go to a party, people ask me like what type they are, and I can't help but respond because I enjoy it so much. So it's more than just a profession. It's what I really love doing.
And we'll be talking about the Enneagram system of personality types, which is also one of your books is about. And we'll be talking about Herb's Tips for Living, which is your other book. Before we talk about that, though, I'd like to get a little sense of your background. So you come from Louisiana, correct?
Well, I say that, but actually I grew up in Kentucky until I was about 10. So I'm from the South, but I lived in Louisiana from like 10. I lived in a little cotton town with a 200 people population when I was 10 and 11, one of my favorite parts of my childhood. But I lived in Louisiana from like 10 to 21. I finished college. And I visit, I go there twice a year to visit my mom, who still lives there, my brother and sister.
And what brought you to Boston?
Well, it's a long story. I was in the Navy for 4 years, and then I married someone who, while in the Navy, I met someone at a meditation retreat who lived in Harvard Square, and we ended up getting married and going to California to photography school. Then I came back here. She wanted to move back here.
And how did you get into therapy?
People ask me. I was teaching workshops. I started teaching workshops in 1979, the end of '79, on communication skills and relationship dynamics. And several people said, "Oh, do you work with people?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I do." So it was kind of a natural outgrowth of my teaching. And then I got the training to do it.
And when did you start working in organizations and companies?
I'd say, over 20 years ago, after I taught workshops for a number of years. Again, there were just several opportunities that people asked me. My very first job was at a hospice, teaching a hospice staff how to work together effectively as well as to work with their clients.
And what kind of companies have you worked in besides hospices and healthcare?
Gosh, I've worked in banks, pharmaceutical companies, schools, churches, software engineering companies, many different educational centers.
And this would be teaching the Enneagram personality system or other kinds of work also?
It's mostly the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs. I teach that too. Basically, those are the two major systems that I use to understand personality differences and ways people can understand each other's differences and work together more effectively. So I give a lot of coaching tips on how to communicate to this type of person, etc. Both for communication, but also for effective working. If you're having fewer conflicts, you'll have more production.
And you started teaching the Enneagram about 20 years ago.
A little over 20 years ago.
Okay. So why don't we talk about the Enneagram and your book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Power of the Enneagram. And first, how would you say the Enneagram is useful? I mean, why would somebody want to learn this personality system?
It helps you understand, there are 9 basic types, which I'll talk about later. It helps you understand how you see the world uniquely, quite differently than other people. It's a very practical tool for that reason. It's particularly useful to understand relationship dynamics and communication dynamics and like why there's conflict between this type and that type. It's very different type per type.
And how is it different from Myers-Briggs, which is probably the most popular personality typing system?
The Myers-Briggs is looking at 4 areas of life and whether you fit on this side of a middle line or not. It's very useful. I use it all the time. To be honest, I use it more as a backup system because the Enneagram hits directly one of 9 perspectives that so deeply affects who you are, this core filter of who you are, that it's just a good way to understand first. I think it's easy to understand. It's accurate. It's in some ways it feels more fun to me, though the Myers-Briggs is really fabulous too.
And what's the history of the Enneagram? How did it come about? What's the source of it?
Well, there's some controversy about how it started. There's been an Enneagram symbol, like the 9. There's a geometric design of 9 types that's been around for 2,500 years. So it has some esoteric meanings. Plato might have really been the first one to actually use it. There was a 3rd century AD philosopher named Plotinus who had a book called the Enneads. So he talked about personality differences. So I personally think that's probably more the source, but I think that came from something before too. So no one knows exactly.
Well, we know it's not some new fad then.
It's not a new fad.
It's been around a little bit longer.
It's been around a little bit.
It's
It's been around strongly since particularly 1970 when there was an international conference on the Enneagram. From that conference, many psychologists and religious leaders in particular went to that conference and spread it around the world quickly.
And what have your personal experiences been, not just teaching it to others, we'll talk about that, but in terms of any insights you've had about yourself from the system?
I'll be honest with you. I learned this. I was in a relationship with someone, and people said, you should take the Enneagram, because we were teaching courses on personality differences, but we weren't using this system. Well, I went to a weekend workshop over 20 years ago, and it changed my life. Nothing has transformed my life as much as the Enneagram, but that weekend, she made sense to me. And I was able to relate to her like twice as effective, like in one weekend, as years before.
And how did you come about writing this book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to the Power of the Enneagram?
I was asked to write it. The folks who do the series emailed me and said, would you like to write a book on the Enneagram?
The Idiot's Guide series.
Yes, and I couldn't believe it would be that. I was actually affirming that would happen from someone, actually a week before I was doing affirmations. Then I got this email. I thought it was a joke, and I responded, and we talked on the phone, and basically it was a long process, but they said, go ahead with it.
Now, you've sold quite a few books, and it's basically word of mouth.
Correct. Yeah, I've sold well over 1,000 on my own, but it's sold, many thousands worldwide. It's all over the world.
And that's pretty impressive. Let's talk about the system itself. There are 9 basic core types or archetypes or perspectives.
Correct.
Of the Enneagram. Why don't you go through each one, and then maybe the people who are watching at home can recognize their own archetype and the strengths and limitations of it.
Well, there's a perfectionist. Type 1 is a perfectionist, basically someone who is strongly identified with doing things right and well and perfect. They're looking at an ideal as a should of how things should be. So they often have a very strong moral and detail focus on getting it right. They even do gestures like this, and they love to be exact, and they think there's a best way for everyone in the world. The type 2 is the helper or the over-helper. Each type overdoes something normal. The helper helps you whether you might want the help or not. Right. So they're focused strongly on pleasing and helping and wanting positive feedback about what a good person they are helping. The 3 is the overachiever, which this is your type, isn't it?
I guess it is.
Yeah. The achiever is basically someone who strongly identifies with goals, outcomes, completions, a to-do list. You have quite a few to-do lists.
Many. Somewhere here I have just check boxes that I check off every day.
This is the American ideal, or the American icon is the 3, is the achiever. Right. The 4 is the romantic or the depth seeker. This is someone who feels things deeply and intensely. They often do gestures from the heart. They're very emotional, very aesthetically oriented. They're very much into beauty and depth and intensity and love and passion. Everything is, kind of has an Italian kind of feel, but it's, though Italy often has a 2 quality too as a giver. The 5 is the objective thinker. This is basically someone who's very intellectual, and everything is more cerebral. Life is about learning and about knowledge and about understanding things in depth, but intellectually. So those
could be technicians too, right?
Often.
Analysts.
Yep. 6 is the questioner or the security seeker. This is someone who's always looking at potential problems and dangers and wanting to solve things in advance. So they're kind of noticing potential banana peels and weather patterns and whatever is necessary to make sure that things are going to go okay. great problem solver. 7's the optimist who says, look, I don't want to look at problems so much, or let's solve them in a fun, quick way. The 7 says everything is great. I only want to look at what's positive and upbeat. They really have a real hard time with anything negative. They don't like complaints. The 8's the director or the boss, basically someone who loves to be in charge, in control, and make things happen, and can do, and strong-willed. Donald Trump would be a good example of an 8. The 9, the peacemaker, is basically someone who, actually that's my type, who likes to get along with everybody. They have a tendency to identify with all 9 types, kind of a bit of everything. They kind of blend and go along with, and they're not very, on average, they're not that assertive, so they need to learn to be more individualized and more direct.
Now, there's grades of development in each type. So in other words, there can be a more developed or more mature type 1 versus a less.
Absolutely. So maturity plays as big a role as type. An immature one would be someone who's just critical and finger pointing all the time. A really highly developed one is someone who's just very committed to doing right action in the world. They're often in charge of, health reform or recycling, or, they're always doing things to reform and improve. One of the titles of the 1, too, is the reformer.
Why don't we come up with some real-life examples of each type that people might know, famous types. So what would be an example of a type 1 that people might know?
I think Hillary Clinton is a 1. You know, she can appear very much like a 3. Politicians often appear as 3s, but very focused on what should be done. You can see it in her body, in her action, in her face. It's just like this kind of, it's got to be this way. The tendency to do things well and right.
Could you think of some other famous type 1s that we might know of?
A lot of ministers. I don't know why I'm thinking of Jimmy Swaggart, but that's possibly a little more dramatic example. But you see a lot of ministers, for instance, who are 1s, particularly have a lot of focus on moral reform.
Right.
That's a very strong focus for 1.
Okay. And can you give examples for the type 2, for the giver, the more developed and less developed examples of?
Let me think, and feel free to pipe in because I know you know this too. Let's see, an example of a 2. Ann Landers, she's an example from the past. But you see a lot of advice kind of columnists who twos often love to give advice. There was a talk show host that used to go in the audience and help people. I'm trying to think of her name now. Anyway, a negative example could be someone who is kind of in your face and takes over your life and really goes beyond helping.
Overhelps.
They overhelp, yeah.
Okay. For type 3, what would be?
Bill Clinton would be an example. I mean, he's a pretty well-known example. Someone who's a strong achiever, and I think our current President Obama is a 3 too. You see a lot of 3s that focus toward politics because they love the limelight. They like to win. They like to achieve.
John Kerry would be a 3.
John Kerry would be an example.
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney would definitely be a 3. Matter of fact, John Kerry was a 3 with the 4 wing, and just bringing this little concept. Not only are you 1 direct type, a wing is an adjacent number that gives you a flavoring. So a 3 with a 4 wing is going to have a very different quality than a 3 with a 2 wing, like Bill Clinton is more kind of connecting with people like a 2 and giving.
More giving, yeah.
And John Kerry's a little more inwardly directed. So you see a little flavor difference when you have some of the subtypes and wing types. Okay.
So for type 4, some famous examples?
So type 4, who's someone who, Prince. You see a lot of singers who...
Singers, right.
Yeah, a lot of singers who have very intense, very dramatic, very special kind of quality.
I was just reading about Neil Young today, and I think Neil Young would be an example of
Neil Young would be a
4.
great example.
A lot of singer-songwriters and actors.
Yeah, a lot of actors and actresses. Who plays in Pirates of the Caribbean? Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp would be a great example of a 4. When he's interviewed, he's always dressed uniquely, unique hair, unique life.
Okay, and for the type 5?
You see a lot of 5s that are Oh, you know who's in charge of Microsoft? Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates. This is, this has been an age of information. Maybe we're moving into other ages now. But age of information is very five, and so the whole computer world is very five. You see a lot of fives in the computer world.
Except for Steve Jobs, is probably a 4.
Yes. Okay. So you'll see exceptions. Maybe he's a 4 with 5 wing. Maybe he's a 3 wing because he's success driven.
And he has that focus on design and beauty, which is very 4-ish.
Which is very 4. 4s can be very, very successful too. I mean, but it's more in a creative way, whereas a 5 is going to be in a more kind of categorical, intellectual knowledge way.
I knew a lot of software engineers. When I consulted to Digital Equipment Corporation, there seemed to be a lot of 5s who were very knowledge-based and very technically oriented. Those would be 5s.
Correct.
Okay.
They tend to be detached. 6. You see a lot of 6s that are like firefighters, police, military, FBI, weather people. The insurance industry is very focused on noticing things, preparing for potential problems and dangers and that sort of thing.
And lawyers can be 6s.
You see a number of lawyers who are 6s.
For a famous 6, Alan Dershowitz might be a 6.
I think so, definitely. Yeah, they're very, very, very analytical. They think through things way in advance. They're great strategic planners.
Okay, and George H.W. Bush.
Both of the Bushes,
Both
both
the Bushes.
junior and senior, I think, both were 6s. They're very concerned about safety and danger and enemies and watch out and protection and the alert system with the 5
the colors.
Colors and it's all about homeland security.
Yeah.
It's a very 6. 7 is just the opposite. Like let's have fun.
Right.
Goldie Hawn, I think Regis Philbin.
Right.
I tend to watch that show.
A lot of comedians
A lot of
are
comedians.
7s, or some of them have some 6 wings. Right?
Yeah, right. I think Carol Burnett, but almost all comedians.
Jay Leno, would he
Jay
be?
Leno is. I think Jay Leno is either a 6 with. I think he's a 6 with a 7 wing, or maybe a 7 with a 6 wing.
And Robin, what's his name?
Robin Williams,
a
Jim
classic.
Carrey.
Yeah.
They're all kind of zany and
Kind of the wild look in their eyes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. A lot of. They love to play with words and humor. The 8 is the director boss. Basically, Donald Trump would be a perfect example.
Sure.
But Martin Luther King, 8s can be very inspiring, very leaderful. Maya Angelou. There's so many.
And they can be blunt too.
They can be very blunt. You find this range within each type that can be.
Barney Frank, I'm thinking of.
Barney Frank is an 8.
Frank.
Yeah.
And for type 9.
Type 9.
famous nines.
I'm the most famous example. No.
After the show, you will be.
Type 9's Jimmy Stewart. I'm thinking of him just that. There's this around 9s you feel this comfortable, peaceful feeling.
Any other famous 9s that in politics or in TV stars and movie stars?
I'm thinking of the Today Show. The new co-host, Ann.
I know who you mean. I don't get up that early though.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an overview of some of the famous types of the 9 types. Could you give us some examples of from either your therapy or your business work in which you have resolved some tricky relationships using the Enneagram? Because a lot of times, whether it's a business relationship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship, I know that just having a different perspective and seeing the world from a different set of assumptions creates conflict, right?
Definitely. This family I just worked with, there was a man whose name is David. He mentioned it's okay to mention his name. He came in to see me because he had been separated from his family. His wife wanted to separate. And by looking at the Enneagram, he was a type 4, and he would often have some strong emotional reactions to things. So his reactions were more based on how he felt. It was very hard for him to be objective. That's very difficult for 4s. 4s are very emotional, and they tend to express from their emotions, and whatever they feel they think is accurate. Well, I taught him how to notice his emotions in reacting less and to realize you can be emotional inside, and it doesn't mean, one, it's accurate, and it doesn't mean you need to express it in any particular way. His wife is a 6, and I worked with the whole family, and she's very concerned about safety and danger, and David had some issues with anger.
Security for her is important.
For her, security is really, really important, and things were getting insecure in a lot of different ways, and he got to understand what was important for her. Their son is a 6 too, and he actually came to a few workshops. There was some tearful connecting and hugging of the father and son because they got to understand. They actively and work with me would fight about some of the things that were important, and they would both get really emotional in a good way. And now they have a great relationship. Matter of fact, I emailed him today to check if it was okay to talk about the family.
Right.
And he says things are going great, better than ever in the last in the 20 years.
And I know there's another example of somebody who is the wife is a type 1.
Right.
And the husband is a
Is
type
a 9.
9, right.
Right. Well, it's interesting because she has very strong opinions about how things should be, and he's more loose about how things should be more flexible. Yet he has a 1 wing, so when she gets one-ish, he gets one-ish, and they're both like, can get very critical. They dig
in a little bit.
They dig in and get really critical. So I've coached him to kind of back off and just let her be, and for her to look at the fact that there are many options, not just the one right option as she sees it.
So I guess it's really important if you're in a relationship, and this could be a takeaway for people who are watching, that if you're in a relationship with someone, if you can understand their archetype, their worldview, it's more easy to communicate into that worldview to be able to satisfy what's important to them in the relationship.
Absolutely.
I mean,
that's my
way.
major key is to understand your world. And if you really want to become good at relating to a person, understand their typology, particularly the Enneagram, it could be Myers-Briggs too, and respect that difference and relate to that world, and also develop that in you. When I was with the 4 for many, many years, I learned how to become more emotional and romantic and intense and passionate, and I generally am kind of like things kind of even and calm, and she just, was more like that, and I learned to be that, and she loved it. It was heaven for her. It was kind of fun for me. Now I'm much more foolish myself.
One of the things where you helped me years ago, and this would be a business example of the power of the Enneagram, I was running a department at a consulting firm, and I had a very young staff. It was all young women who barely spoke to each other. It's amazing that we could work together. And anytime I intervened, then I was the bad guy. And I remember calling you one time, trying to make sense of this whole thing, pulling arrows out of my chest, so to speak. And you asked me to talk about each one, and you typed them for me and then explained where the conflict was. And then I could relate to one person who was a type 3, who was an achiever. And I think your advice to me was just get out of her way, let her do her thing. She just wanted to produce results and didn't want to be bothered. And another person was a type 6 who had some trust issues, didn't trust me or her colleagues, and I needed to make her feel more appreciated and trusted. And there was someone else who was a 7 who wanted to have more fun. And you just broke it down for me, and probably in about 10 minutes. And it was, it was sort of fog cleared. So I became a convert to the Enneagram way back when.
Thanks, John. That's a great example. By the way, I do phone sessions where I can often type people in absentia. It's easier if the person's online, but if you describe someone, I can generally type accurately and give coaching tips on how to communicate to that type. And I've had hundreds of people that I've coached who's followed some of the tips, and they'll say, my gosh, this was great. And once you know someone's type, you can, almost like clockwork, know exactly what to do, and it'll happen. I've seen miracles happen, really, in even 1 or 2 sessions, either in person or phone.
Now, how do people contact you? Through herbpierce.com?
Right, my website, herbpierce, PEARCE.com. You can call 781-648-3737. Or email me at herb@herbpierce.com.
Great. Okay. I think that's probably all we need to cover about the the Enneagram. Anything else just you want to mention about the Enneagram system?
Well, just, we were talking about famous personalities.
Yeah.
If you go to my book has lots of examples.
Oh, great.
Sometimes on the spot I forget, but there's lots of famous people examples in the book. And the book is great. I've had, it's got a 5-star review on Amazon.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and people love it. I've had many people who've studied the Enneagram for years say it's really their favorite book. There's lots of personal life examples. There's a lot of relationship dynamic tips on there. There's spiritual development, how to detect type in people. There's 2 chapters on work in the Enneagram, work relationships.
I just thought of another application of the Enneagram. In watching politics, this is election, or well, it's pre-primary season, and there's a lot of different characters to view. And it's interesting because you can see the Enneagram archetype of the different candidates. There was just a Republican debate, and you could begin to see how their personality takes shape. And it gives you insight into kind of understanding them. Mitt Romney, for instance, would be a classic 3, and is very adaptable, and because he wants to be, the 3 is also considered to be a bit of a salesman.
Sure.
Right? For better or worse. I mean, salespeople, that can be good. I mean, I'm a 3, so I'm not going to put down a 3. But he has a lot of those 3-like qualities, for instance. And there were Donald Trump, who isn't in the campaign, but threatens he may get back into it. As an 8, he has a whole different kind of energy, which is a lot more dominant, and he seems to want to shake things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Yeah, 8s love to kind of shake things up, and the 1 is kind of like the good boy, good girl of the Enneagram, and the 8's the bad boy, bad girl kind of quality.
And how would you type Ron Paul in the system?
I'm not. What do you think? Because I know John knows politics really well.
Yeah,
Put it back on you.
I mean, he could. He's very analytical, so he could be a 5.
Possible.
The sum of that a 5. And as a libertarian, because he's because it's freedom-based, and that's a critical value of a type 7.
Very 7. It could be a 7. Could be a 7. We'll analyze it and get back to you.
Michelle Bachmann, who really made a splash in that debate. What?
I just have, unless I really look at someone and think about it well, I'm not sure.
Right. Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about your more recent book, because the Enneagram book came out several years ago.
Right.
Right. Was it 2007, 2008?
2007.
2007. And Herb's Tips for Living just came out this spring. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. So it's a fresh book. It came about because people asked me to write it. I send a newsletter. By the way, if anyone wants to get my weekly email newsletter, you just call me or send me an email and just say you want to get the newsletter. It's free. It includes my tips and events. And so, it was fun to write. They're all new. I mean, I've been sending these tips for over 10 years, but I decided to just come up with totally new ones for this book.
And what's your favorite section of the different topics? Because you cover a lot of ground in this
I'd say
book.
that the topics of there's one on relationships, there's one on communication skills and romance. My specialty is working with relationship dynamics, both with the Enneagram and just general communication skills.
On the communication skills, I'm going to just pull out a couple of these tips, and you can expand on them as you will. One of them is to understand another's nonverbal expressions. Now, I can see how important that would be in a romantic relationship, as well as in business meetings in the corporate world. Understanding somebody can be saying one thing, but their body language can be saying something else. So right. Can you explain a little bit about?
Well, I'd say with that, trust your intuition. Someone might be saying something, but the way they hesitate or the way they question things, or whether they're kind of open and smiley or really reserved. It might tell you something about how they're thinking about you, but again, it might be their Enneagram type.
Right.
So it's like a 6 questioner is going to question you no matter what. Even if, matter of fact, if they feel secure with you, they'll still question you. So, but I'd say, many people who have researched say that, most communication is nonverbal. If someone's resisting you constantly, well, pay attention. They might be saying something positively or I'm going to do this. Well, if they're not doing it, they're not doing it. Pay attention to what they do as much as, if more than what they say.
And body language, of course. I mean, the classic is if somebody is doing this, they're probably
Well, they might be
not
cold. I do this. I mean, that one I resist because sometimes I'm cold
Right.
a lot, and I fold my. I don't buy that one so much necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
You say give as much information as someone wants, and the opposite of that is don't give too much information. I've noticed that in the business world, there are some people that just, of course, as a type 3, I just want the minimum. Mm-hmm. And I just oftentimes find myself in conversations either by phone or in person where I'm just getting way too much information. I don't want to be impolite and tell them to stop, but sometimes I have to. But that's an important aspect of communication for you, right?
Sure. I mean, and it varies. You really have to pay attention. If you're it's hard to not talk about the Enneagram because if you're talking to someone who wants a lot of information, give them that. If
Right.
not, don't. I mean, don't just be who you are. Alter yourself a bit for the particular person you're with. A lot of people say, "Oh, I just want to be myself." Well, good luck. I mean, you have to kind of alter yourself a bit. And some of my communication skills, just basic things: be respectful. Don't repeat a lot. That's a big one. If you're saying it more than 2 times, you're bored. You're boring. Like 3 times, you're out. Right. If you're questioning whether someone is hearing you, ask them, did I come across clearly? Could you feed back to me? Something like that.
Okay. Where did I just see this? Never assume that your worlds are alike. Communicate from your world to theirs, which actually gets back to the Enneagram. To really appreciate where someone is, how somebody is listening, what their world is, rather than just be broadcasting information. You always want to be tailoring it to the
Absolutely.
person who
For
is
instance,
listening.
a friend of mine recently got laid off from her job. Well, I'm not going to, just cheer her up all the time. It doesn't work for her. I mean, I empathize and her feelings, and we talk about them. And then I say, well, here's some options. Maybe here's another way of some things you can do. So empathize and listen first. And then if you want to offer something, check in or offer it. But don't push that first.
Okay.
Follow where someone's at.
My favorite topic in your book is on romance.
Okay.
And I have a belief that one of your strengths in counseling on relationships is giving people insights into the illusion of romance. And you have a line here that illusion can create pain, yet there can certainly be real romance, excitement, and fulfillment that can be sustained but only by seeing and accepting a person's wonderful parts beyond the fantasy. Because one of your themes is to beware of the fantasy of romance. Could you say a little bit more about that?
See, many of us are driven, myself included, by the longing for whatever it is you're looking for. And it's just so easy to project that onto another person. And certainly in the beginning of any relationship, that can happen. Try to pay attention to what's real beyond your just seeing the most positive traits. Matter of fact, some people I actually encourage to be a little negative. Some people are so positive and all they want to see is what they want to see, and they see the best of everyone.
So they're projecting.
They're projecting. That can be as dangerous as seeing the negative, so you want to be in reality. Reality requires that you pay attention to actually what is happening, who someone actually is beyond what you're making up. So romance is wonderful, thank God, and at the same time it can be dangerous.
Yeah, you say that romance can lead a horse to water, yet the real relationship starts when the illusions of romance wears off.
Exactly. I've counseled couples for over 30 years. That's one of my specialties. And the ones that work the best are always the ones that have flexibility toward seeing a real person and not comparing them constantly to some ideal or some should or something. Really caring about another person and really experiencing their individuality and seeing the value of that. One of the things I particularly do with couples is to affirm each other every day. To focus on what you like, and even say it verbally. I encourage people to be as verbal as possible because I think people need to hear positive things.
As opposed to, I told you I loved you 20 years ago.
Ugh, it's boring. Please don't do that.
Right. Another tip is go for the top 3 or 4 must-haves on your checklist and let go of less important things.
Yeah, pick what's really, really, really crucial. Like bottom line, you cannot have an exception. And then after that, be flexible. If you have a long list, you're probably not interested in a relationship. I challenge people when they have these long lists and then you have one thing wrong and then they don't want to be in a relationship. They don't really want to be in a relationship.
You say keep romance alive doing new activities, going to restaurants, going on trips, things like that.
Find new and different things to do that can spice things up. Some people just love to do the same thing over and over, and it's fine. If it's working, it's working. I'm not here to change that. But, go to a new, go to a cave to explore, go hang glide, whatever it is that might be kind of different that you can talk about later and go, wow, that was so cool. I'm so glad I experienced that with you. One of the best romantic tips is to share an exciting experience with another human being. And you'll have a lifetime. Today I build decks. I'm helping someone build a deck, and it's like, wow, it wasn't romantic, but it was so exciting to learn how to do this.
Affirm and appreciate each other is something.
That is, how I start out the day just about every day. I make a gratitude list of about 50 things. I do a to-do list, that's my last part, but I do a looking forward to list, things I'm looking forward to, and then an affirmations list of things, positive statements of things I'm aiming toward, and then I do a to-do list of things to do that day. It gives you kind of a positive start, and it gives you a focus toward action.
It's kind of I'm reading from your book, treat yourself as a romantic partner.
Exactly.
In effect. Do you have any particular success stories about your counseling of romantic partners, aside from the one that you told, in which applying these tips or helping them to apply the tips has made a difference in their lives?
I was thinking of a couple a long time ago that I coached, and it was a 2-5 couple, and he was very kind of reserved.
Again, type 2 is the giver,
helper.
The helper. And type 5 is the analyst.
The analyst, kind of, sometimes 5s can be a little dry and not very verbal.
Right.
And I explained this, and she really, really understood. As a matter of fact, there was another couple recently, I did the same thing with it. 2-5 is a very common coupling, so I work a lot. There's 45 combinations. And once she understood how he showed his love by doing things, fixing things, giving her ideas, but he wasn't that expressive. As soon as she got that and she appreciated that more, he started opening up and being more verbal. It's funny. There's a book called Love Languages, and some people like to give, some people like to give gifts, some people like to be affectionate, some people like to verbal stroke. There's a lot of ways that people give. So pay attention to how someone's giving to you. It might not fit your idea, but if you appreciate them for what they are doing, they'll start, and you say what you want, a certain way that you want. Could you touch me more? Could you be more verbal? Could you do acts of service? Wash the dishes. That's how I feel loved. Everyone's different.
Right.
Find out that individual's unique experience of loving, and you'll be much happier.
Something you said about relationships here is realize that hurt is often re-triggered from past hurts. It's a very simple but powerful realization that if you are the one being hurt, that it may not have anything to do really with the person that you're in a relationship and they do something and you're hurt by it. Mm-hmm. But if you're really hurt by it, it may not really have that much to do with what the person just did.
It may or may not. Generally, it does to some degree.
To some extent.
To some degree, but often it goes back to the past. Often it goes back to your childhood, etc. So a major thing that I think is crucial to do is to forgive your parents. That takes a lot of work. I know I feel totally. I've forgiven my parents totally. I don't have anything going there at all. And I worked at that. It was a conscious effort, and that makes it easier to relate to people because you'll expect a lot less. from people when you let them be.
Now, you said something about gratitude a minute ago. I realize that's a whole a topic. Mm-hmm. Gratitude fills you with abundance and like a magnet keeps attracting what supports you. There was a book and a movie called The Secret that was very mm-hmm. popular, which talks about depending upon what you dwell on, what you have your thoughts on, what you wish for, what you're thinking about, that will gravitate to you similar things.
You know, we wash our clothes, right? So you got to wash your mind. So if you're having like dirty thoughts or thoughts that don't serve you, then you got to clean them out. You need to keep focusing, like use your mind toward that which you want, and also to be grateful for that which you have, and to be appreciative of everything in the universe, people, animals, rocks, whatever, that serves you. And if you do that, you'll attract more of what you're looking for. By the way, you know, you mentioned that chapter. There's 23 chapters in the book. Okay. And there's like one on decision making, there's one on nature, there's one on having fun, being creative, relaxation. You know, there's lots of, I try to cover like every basic part of life. There's a big chapter on spirituality. Matter of fact, I do lots of workshops, so I want to mention that. I do workshops on all of these topics in the book. Besides the Enneagram, I do many beginning and advanced Enneagram workshops, but I also do workshops on gratitude and communication skills and relationship dynamics and spiritual freedom and that sort of thing. I think life is about mastering, you know, enjoying life.
Right.
So
and you do these workshops out of your home in Arlington?
Out of my home in Arlington.
Arlington, Massachusetts, for our out-of-state viewers.
And I travel. You know, I teach. Many people hire me to teach for their friends or associates in their homes or educational centers. Or I particularly have been teaching a lot in churches. I teach the Enneagram and many of these other workshops with schools, teachers, you know, for staff development or team development in an organization. I've worked in a number of companies, a lot of medical instrument companies, you know, for instance, manufacturing companies, whoever, so that people can get along better, basically. Sometimes a leadership team. You
were telling me a story of you were working with one organization, and we won't mention the organization, and you didn't tell me the name of it anyway, but there was, this is so classic that you can probably map this onto 1,000 companies, where the staff was having difficulty relating to the boss. It was a small company, and so the general manager, or actually I guess the owner of the company, and he was oblivious to the fact that everybody had problems with him.
Yeah.
And you had to work with the team to better communicate to him and for him to be able to listen to them. Is that
right? I mean, accurate? he wasn't aware. I mean, you know, very powerful energy, but he wasn't aware that other people were seeing him as a bit insensitive, because he just likes to say what he thinks and do it this way and that sort of thing. And he needed feedback, simply that people were seeing him this way. Everyone needs feedback, you know, about how you're seen. And of course, everyone's going to see you differently anyway. But no one is perfect. No one gets that luxury. I mean, everyone needs a little feedback at times about how they're seen and ways they can improve.
Right. Back to the book. Nature, I know, it's a topic here, and it's important to you. And you give bird walks.
Yeah, I lead bird and plant walks. I particularly lead birdsong walks, and I do a unique thing. I do plants and birds at the same time. If people want all that information, I go on a million walks myself, and have studied and read a million books on it. And I'm outdoors all the time. I'm in heaven now. It's summer. It's like, first day of summer. This is like blessing.
You're a real Renaissance man. You give courses in almost anything, it seems.
I've taught well over 5,000 workshops in the last 30-something years, and there must be at least 300 or 400 titles.
You even have, I didn't notice this before, you even have a topic on food in your book.
Right.
About how to enjoy
food. I'm very much into pleasure. Pleasure is really important for me. Matter of fact, fun and pleasure are some of my top values. And so if you're going to eat, enjoy it. If you're going to walk, enjoy it. Breathe the air. I mean, just visually use all your senses to enjoy what's here now, like be here now. I mean, I work at this too. I mean, to live Herb's Tips is a challenge. I I work at Living Herbs too.
Let's talk a little bit about spirituality, because I know that's very important to you, and is the topic in your book. When you're giving classes, workshops in spirituality, what are some of the things that you cover?
Well, I focus on the fact that we're told that who we are is this individual self and ego, which is, it's useful to understand and to be individual. On a deeper level, who's to say where this individuality ends? Is it this cell next to my skin? I mean, truthfully, we're all connected. There's no such thing as that you're just an individual person. You're part of a whole. You're always part of a whole. And the more that you're aware that you exist as a connectedness to everything, and I don't mean this philosophically, I mean for real,
right.
You'll be a lot happier. If you think you're just an individual, then you tighten up, because you have to esteem yourself here, you have to accomplish this, you have to make this kind of money. You have all these things you think you have to do to be happy. You don't have to do anything to be happy. Just be. And you're part of everything. You can enjoy everyone else's experiences too, because you're part of them. I mean, for instance, the thought of war seems insane to me. Why would I kill myself? If you're me and I'm you, like, why would I kill? It seems totally ridiculous.
Very Hindu perspective.
Totally. I mean, matter of fact, my tradition is Advaita Vedanta, which is kind of like a modern Hindu, version.
Right. Another topic in Herb's Tips for a Living is emotions, and managing one's emotions. Anything you want to say in that regard?
Well, when we all get emotional, most of us, and so you can have emotion. I mean, be in touch, accept your fear, accept sadness, joy, anger, and fear. To me, those are the primary kinds of emotion. And so just be at home more in your feelings, but don't always rant your feelings out. I mean, just because you have feelings, they don't mean they're true. Many people think their feelings are a definition of what's true. It's like, be aware of the environment. If you're angry at someone, well, maybe what did you do to contribute to what's not working? If someone is like hurting you in some ways, maybe you should get away from them, or say what you want, or set a limit, or there's something creative you might need to learn about that.
You say that emotions can be your friend to clarify, nurture you, inform you, so you can learn from your emotions.
Exactly. If you're angry, for instance, what is it? What do you want different? Identify what you want different. See if you can make that happen. For instance, I have a very, very close friend. We talked the other night, and we've been very close friends for many, many years. And we had a conflict around some things, and we just talked it out, really directly, in a very caring, respectful way. And things are fine. We just needed to clarify. And there's some differences and some things that could still come up as problems. There's nothing wrong with conflict. There's nothing wrong with differences. I mean, any close relationship is going to have differences, most likely, and will cause conflict at times. So what? Let that be. People get all freaked out by conflict. How you handle the conflict is what's important.
How you resolve it.
How you resolve the conflict.
How quickly, how thoroughly.
Can you accept the difference? Can you clarify the differences, accept the differences, talk respectfully, and make sure someone talks respectfully to you? I don't let people talk disrespectfully to me, ever.
So that's a matter of making sure you have firm boundaries.
Yeah.
And not letting people tee off.
I'm pretty open and pretty loose in ways, but if someone's disrespectful, I stop the conversation and say, wait a minute, look. You're not talking to me respectfully. It's really important.
Another topic, work. Very important to us. For many of us, it's our life.
Yeah. Particularly in the United States, it's a workaholic culture, sure.
That's right. What else is there for some? I was just reading in the Boston Globe, I think it was today, about people who take their work to bed. They used to just turn off the computer and go to bed. Now they bring their Blackberries and
their iPhones
to bed. And then they do the next level of communicating. And then they fall asleep with the iPhone next to them. One person who even takes phone calls all night. You can reach him anytime.
24 hours a day.
And it's true. Now
hey, whatever floats your boat. I mean, I'm not one to say that's right or wrong. Honestly, I tell you, whatever works. And so. But work is important. I think whatever you do, it's important. I've been committed all my life to do work I love. I just cannot not do that. I have to do work I love because it's so important to be yourself and for your own enjoyment, for your own development, for your own risk-taking. You know, hopefully your work is something that moves you along in life so you learn new and different things.
But you don't go to bed with your iPhone, though, right?
No, I don't.
You can turn it off.
I have a little stuffed animal.
We won't go into that. Right? Relaxation. That's another topic in your book.
Relaxation, I tell you, the key to life is to relax. I'm convinced of it. The key to life is to relax. It's like you could be in the middle of the worst crisis, and if you can relax and just let it be and be in this moment. I remember once I do whitewater canoeing. It's one of my hobbies, and I was, and I go in the wilderness alone. I mean, it's crazy, but and I got stuck on this rock, and here I am in the middle of this river, and I'm like, okay, let me relax. I got to get off this rock. And I had to push the canoe. I had to think first. I had to push the canoe off and then jump in the canoe. Well, if I had missed, I mean, it would be not good.
You might not be here.
But I relaxed. I meditated in the middle of that. I just kind of closed my eyes for a minute, and I just went inside. I meditate most every day. I just went inside, got connected, quiet, peaceful. You can feel it now. It's just this energy that's always here. No matter what goes on in life, there's always this quiet, peaceful energy. And answers come in the quiet. Answers can come with a thinking mind, but the more you can slow your mind down to almost stillness, then you can get answers.
Decision making is a topic in Herb's Tips for Living.
And I'll be honest, that's a tough one for me because I love a lot of options. I have a lot of options. I kind of enjoy life, and so again, I think if you get quiet and you can make a decision, being more quiet, look at the options. Maybe get feedback. But do what feels right, separate from thinking about it. Do what just intuitively feels good and right to you. And keep listening to the last second, because sometimes you might have to alter a decision and make a decision in advance if you need to, but at the same time, keep listening because something could shift. Trust your gut. How many times have people told me, thousands, oh, I wish I would have listened to myself. All the time I knew this relationship was this or that or this decision. Oh, I wish I could go back and change that. Go with your gut, and keep listening. Listen all the time to you. Listen to you inside is more than other people, really.
One of your last topics in the book is how to make a living doing what you love and how to enjoy life, whether you work for yourself or others. Sounds like this is what you do.
Totally. I've always been committed to doing work and living my life the way I want to live my life. I think it's important to take the risk to try to have your life match up as close as possible to your ideal and your interests and your values and your enjoyment.
And once again, if people want to get a hold of you, it's herbpierce.com.
Right, yeah. herbpierce.com, Pearce, and you can call me anytime. I'm very open.
Not 24
Not
hours
24. I'd say from 8 in the morning to 11 at night. That's actually pretty true. I love people. 781-648-3737. Email me anytime, herb@herbpierce.com.
Great. Any last thoughts? Anything that we haven't mentioned about the Enneagram or Herb's Tips for a Living?
Just in case, if you want to get my newsletter, just send me an email that you want to get my newsletter. It's a good way to contact me, and just call me up if you want to say hi. The main thing I want to leave you with is just be yourself, be you. Don't be overly guided by other people telling you who you are. No one knows you fully but you, and even that changes all the time. So just keep listening, keep listening, keep listening.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Herb Pierce. Thank you for watching.